Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in this, my first intervention of what may be a few under this head of education budget. We, yes, take note that the allocation under this head for this year is similar to what it was last year. I think a difference of about $8 million more. Not that much difference. Within the last few years under this Democratic Labour Party government, the general allocation has been around $500 million a year. I believe it was just over $500 million in the first term of this administration. But of course, like everything else, even in terms of the social sector, when the government cut immediately after the election, it is now below $500 million a year. Between the first 34 years of our sovereignty as a nation, successive governments spent about $15 billion on education, and under the administrations of the Right Excellent Errol Barrow and the Right Honourable Tom Adams, about 23% of the government's budget used to be spent on education. That is now down, sir, to about 16–17%. That 22–23% in those days helped create the society that we now are in terms of building up our human resource capacity, in terms of taking many people of the majority race of this country out of poverty and into the middle economic class, and of making Barbados what it used to be known as in the world in terms of a brand name and the leading developing country in the world, the leading black ruled country in the world, up to certainly 4 years ago. But now, sir, I think one of the basic problems that we have in this ministry is that there's no vision, no defined vision of where we want to lead Barbados, and that can be said of the whole government. You know, countries that intend to progress in this world have always defined a vision of where they want to go. The frank truth, yes, sir, the Right Excellent Errol Barrow had a vision of Barbados in terms of educational development and independence of people, and he took it a step there. I mean, before him, of course, the Right Excellent Sir Grantley Herbert Adams had a vision to empower the majority race, black race in Barbados, and make us equal partners in our own country, which we more than ever helped develop. Coming after, the Right Honourable Tom Adams saw the development of Barbados in terms of an international business community and mathematics and science, because he was a top mathematician himself. But what has been the major defects of this government, and whether those on the other side agree or not, I mean, and so they really and truly can choose to disagree. They can choose to disagree. They don't have to listen to us. For 9 years, they didn't listen to us, but now suddenly, according to the Honourable Minister of Finance, they now want to listen, having realized themselves they've been failures. One of the problems is that this government as a whole, and the Ministry of Education as part of this government, has not defined any concept or vision, certainly not any that has been communicated to the people of this country, of where they would want to see Barbados, where they would want to lead Barbadians in the next 5, 10, 15 years in terms of development. And the Ministry of Education has certainly failed in this respect. We should be in a position, Mr. Chairman, where the Minister of Education has been able to come here today and say, look, the goal of my government, even at this late stage, is to make Barbados the entrepreneurial capital of the Caribbean. And my ministry sees itself as the primary product in achieving that. And that therefore, from early childhood education, from primary schools, we will have as part of our curriculum a system training young people, training 4- or 5-year-olds to become entrepreneurs, so that when they become adults, they can employ themselves, they can create their own businesses, they can employ their families, they can employ people in their districts, rather than a situation where we graduate from University of the West Indies with management degrees and still looking to government for a job, or looking to the private sector for a job. In many cases, most cases, afraid to take the step to form your own businesses, largely because we have not been trained in the skills of becoming entrepreneurs and employers of ourselves. But the Ministry of Education has to take primary blame for that. The issue, Mr. Chairman, is that yes, we have come a far way in terms of education. I mean, some people would say, and I think the Right Honourable Prime Minister has said so on many occasions, you know, he's the historian in here, more than anyone else, that even under colonialism, education of the majority of people was taken more seriously than in other Caribbean islands. I mean, of course, before the establishment of the churches in 1968, education was tied to the Anglican Church, the main church of the country, certainly in those days, and near to every church, as we know, there was a school, some kind of school, and I believe it was said that we had 100 schools or some kind of figure like that in colonial times in Barbados. But of course, we know that under slavery and immediate post-emancipation period, the education of the majority of people in Barbados was geared towards the plantation and making you fit and proper for the plantation. But still, we took that then into the post-1937 period under the Right Excellent Sir Grantley, building on education certainly, and from the 1950s, starting with free secondary education at St. Princess Margaret, at the now Grantley Adams School, West St. Joseph, at St. Leonard's School, at Parkinson School. We know that. So in fact, that they had free secondary education before the Right Excellent Errol Barr became head of this country. And we know that, yes, the Right Excellent Errol Barr built on that, and we moved to free, full, comprehensive, free secondary education. Although, sir, something that is unknown to the majority of Barbadians, that when the Barbados Labour Party took office in 1976 under the Right Honourable Tom Adams, the majority of secondary school students still had to pay some money, fees to go to school. So the Right Excellent, that is a fact, that they had many schools, including the one that some of the cabinet ministers there on that side went to the federal. I believe the same Honorable Minister of Education went there. You had to pay tuition fees at about 20 odd schools in 1976. That what happened was that the government may have supplemented some of that by payment of...
Please, honourable members, please, keep it on. Keep it on.
Mr. Speaker, I did not interrupt the honourable member. The honourable member got in here when he spoke yesterday saying that he doesn't interrupt anyone, and immediately as I
honourable member, please, just stick to the topic and let's get on.
The fact of the matter, sir, and I have heard...
Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, I wouldn't want the honourable member...
Honourable member, the point of order?
...misleading the House.
Okay.
In fact, even though I have the greatest respect for the Federal High School, I did not attend that school.
No.
And in 1976, I had long graduated.
Honourable, please proceed. Thank you.
Just a correction and interruption.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter, sir, is that yes, and the first Minister of Education in the Tom Adams government, now Sir Louis Tull, who my parliamentary colleague here is a fit and excellent successor in St. George South, verifies the fact that when he became Minister of Education in 1976, that the majority of children going to secondary school in Barbados had to pay tuition fees. That they had about 20 schools stemming from the modern, federal, Washington, metropolitan, Arlington. I'm sure the honourable member for St. Thomas can call all of them lynches, about 20, where children were still paying fees. So this thing about free secondary education under the Democratic Labour Party is not correct. What happened, Mr. Chairman, is that those fees may have been supplemented to some extent by the government, subsidized, you call it, but they had to pay. But the issue here is, yes, sir, though all those administrations had a vision of where you wanted to leave Barbados to. Sadly speaking, this present Democratic Labour Party administration has evinced no such vision. And in a time of economic depression in the country, 9 years, largely because of the mismanagement of this cabinet, we should have had that kind of vision. That is what countries with progressive political leadership do. We should, if the vision was not for us to become the entrepreneurial capital of the West Indies, our vision then should have been to become the scientific and top technological hub of the Caribbean. And therefore, we should have been creating science parks here, as the Right Honourable Member for St. Peter has said on many occasions, especially when he was on a leader of the Barbados Labour Party, that we should have been creating scientific and technological hubs. What we get instead, Mr. Chairman, is yes.
I remember your time has expired.
Can I just finish, sir? The sentence, I beg leave. What we have instead, Mr. Chairman, is just words and rhetoric from the government of Barbados and the ministry on this particular issue without any translation of those words and rhetoric into real action. I would, of course, come back under this head, Mr. Chairman.